Today on Back and Brew, we have Mark Mescher, the VP of Sales at Medscout. Medscout is an amazing platform that we use every day at Alliance Medical. Medscout allows our reps to be able to weaponize data to effectively partner with a surgeon customer. I'm so excited to be able to dive into this subject. This is Back and Brew. Mark, thanks for coming on today. I'm super excited about your program. You're with Medscout. What is your actual title with Medscout?
I am the Vice President of Sales with Medscout.
Awesome. All right. So basically you run the company then if that comes down to that point.
Yeah. I'm sure my co-founders would not agree, but yeah, no, we're doing a lot of cool stuff on the data front and just really changing the game when it comes to moving that data into actionable insights and putting it in the hands of the medical sales reps instead of pushing some spreadsheet out to them that's just not useful.
I'm really excited about talking about how you guys actually enable, or I should say, you show your customer how to weaponize the data to move sales forward, to identify the right customer. There's a ton of different ways to skin this cat. We use it at our distributorship and at Darkwater Consulting. I'm really excited to jump into it. But first, this is Back and Brew. And you used to live here in Colorado, so tell us a little bit about the brew you chose.
I did. So this is an homage to my time in Colorado. I spent 16 years here. It was a great time in my life. We moved on to Texas about 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic for a variety of reasons, is for another show. But in my time here, this was one of my favorite bourbons. Since moving to Texas, it's been harder for me to find. It's not sitting on the shelf of every liquor store down there like it is here in Colorado, but it's just a great sipping bourbon at the end of the day to, reflect on, did I do everything I could in my day to do what I needed to get things done. So,
and this is Breckenridge Distillery's bourbon.
Yeah.
So I absolutely I've been to this actual distillery. One, I love their restaurant. Their food's fantastic.
It is.
Like it's
absolutely.
so good, and that's kind of my knock sometimes on some of the ski towns is they get to be too commercialized to where it's like, yeah, there may not be chain restaurants, but they all kind of taste the same. It's like if you go to certain all-inclusive resorts, it's like if you go to the Mexican restaurant or the Chinese restaurant or the Italian restaurant, it's all the same chicken.
Totally.
It's just,
Breckenridge has certainly kept its authenticity for sure.
This Breckenridge, this place is, you go there and it's a different experience. The food's fantastic. They have a beautiful wedding venue. Couldn't say enough good things about Breckenridge Distillery.
And as an added benefit in the healthcare space we're in, interestingly, it was started by a radiologist.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
What was the kind of spark of genius for the radiologist starting this?
I think from my understanding and reading the story, he was a fisherman, and he and a buddy realized that there was not a good distillery in the state of Colorado, and considering all the fresh water that we've got in Colorado, felt it was a great opportunity. And my understanding is that's where it spawned from.
Huh, kind of like a need-based solution. All right. Well,
totally.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm going to open it up with a little bit of a couple drops of water if you want some. So this is something that I'm sure people, I learned this at a sommelier showed me that of actually drinking whiskey. He's like, yeah, this is an easy way to open it up with a couple drinks of water, or a couple drops of water. But yeah, this is a great bourbon. I've loved this bourbon. They come out with a bunch of different types. Some are a little too flavored for me.
They do, yeah. They've got some reserve and a few flavors and stuff. I just prefer the original.
This is a great one. It's like heavy caramel, kind of candied apple. Yeah, it's
just clean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one's great. Not hot on the end.
No, great legs. It's all good.
Yeah. Bourbon is by far my favorite thing that anyone's going to bring on here, most likely.
Good.
There's some cool things that people will bring on, right? Like traditionally, I hate sake. Jeff Marks brought on sake, and it was actually a good sake.
Nice.
And what was another one that we had? We had we've had wine on here.
I thought about bringing wine, but I wanted to really just specifically go not only the bourbon route, but the Colorado route.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. All right, now let's jump into kind of your company's spark of of genius in creating a solution off of a need in multiple industries, I would say, but mainly healthcare, that healthcare is not able to capture data or utilize data in the same way that, an Amazon does or a lot of other industries do. So tell me a little bit about Medscout. Like if you were to break it down to someone who didn't know about it.
Yeah. So essentially we pull in all of the claims data. So claims data being procedures, diagnosis, prescription information that's shared between the provider, the practice, and the center through the insurance companies, right? So to determine to get reimbursed and things of that nature. We can take that data both from Medicare claims as well as commercial claims, and we turn that into actionable information that's helpful for essentially the entire commercial team at a medical device company, diagnostic company, and things of that nature. So that allows them to really understand what they're looking at for data and use it actively in the ways of understanding who's doing the most procedures in a particular geography, or who's diagnosing and seeing the most patients that would be relevant to me as a physician when I'm trying to build my practice. Where do my referrals come from? Things like that really allow a medical device team to really help their customers in new ways and also find the right customers. So we took all that data. Historically, there are some large data companies out there that do this, but they typically do it more in kind of a research database fashion, where by the time that information makes it out to a rep in the field or a manager or to a marketing person, it's in the form of a spreadsheet. Not terribly useful information. And if they go a step further, it might be buried in their CRM, in their Salesforce environment. Not terribly useful either, because as I like to say, they call it Salesforce because sales reps are forced to use it. It's not an easy thing for people to work with. So we wanted to create something that really was a platform that put that information at the fingertips of the people that need it the most, and present it in a way that is easily understandable and very intuitive.
So like my first interaction with anything like this was when I worked at NuVasive and they had definitive healthcare.
Yep.
And I had a brilliant manager that could understand and weaponize it, but to transfer that passion and really consolidate the data down to a defined sales tool was almost impossible.
Totally.
Which that's what was so cool about Medscout when I found out about it. I think it was Ron Eccles from Innovasis was actually who introduced me to it. And I was like, this is so clean, simple, digestible, and navigatable. I could actually pull this up in my car, research what I need to look up, learn about the customer. And before I walk into that sales meeting with a new surgeon, I could tell him who the top referring sources for low back pain were in that area. I could look at his referral sources and not only see, who are your top 5 referring providers, but who else do they refer to?
Totally.
And it is wild to sit down with someone, with a potential customer, surgeon customer, and not talk about a product first. It completely throws them for a loop. They don't have access to this data mostly.
No, they usually don't. It's actually quite surprising when you show them their own referral network and they have very little visibility into understanding that. I would even take it a step further and to say the vast majority of medical device reps out there spend a whole bunch of their time targeting the wrong physicians or customers in general. And what they end up doing is just spinning their wheels by spending a lot of their time before they even get to product, asking a bunch of discovery questions to see if it's even a good target before they start dumping feature and benefit on them. And if they knew what is their ideal customer profile and then can research before they go into those targeted calls to understand who they should actually be targeting, but then going into a call and presenting information about, hey, I understand that you see a lot of this type of patient, and I know that you do a lot of these particular procedures. That goes a heck of a long way when you're having a conversation with a physician, just to show credibility. They're going to, really appreciate the fact that, hey, you did your homework, you understand my practice, and you're probably going to get a lot more of their ear at that point in time. And then you can expand with the data to really develop a partnership with them by taking that referral data and saying, who isn't sending the patients that you want to see to you, right, at the primary care level? Who's seeing a lot of those patients And how do you drive an educational campaign to get more of the right patients coming to you? You provide that level of value to your customers. It is invaluable in building that trustful relationship.
I totally agree. And the funny thing is, like, I could make this a shameless plug for Darkwater Consulting Surgeon Branding Program. But regardless of someone's size, as a med device rep, especially in spine, you have to be a marketing professional. Like, you have to figure out a way to partner with your physicians in helping them drive referrals. Yep. The best subspecialty in our industry that I see do this are the spinal cord stimulator companies. Mm-hmm. They track the referrals and the referral patterns better than anyone in any office I've ever seen. And I mean, I came from the spinal cord stimulator background. I was a spinal cord stimulator rep for about 2.5 years, and it blew my mind once I got over to spine that no one was doing this for hardware. They were too busy fighting over feature benefit. It was shocking to me that this opportunity was just thrown to the wayside to really partner with your customer.
Well, most people just don't understand what's available as far as the data and then what you can do with it. So there are large capital equipment companies, as an example, will use this data to go into a hospital system and say, I'll use prostate cancer as an example. So you've seen 1,000 patients come through your door who've been diagnosed with prostate cancer. However, 65% of them decided to go to these two places across town instead of having surgery here. You only kept 35% of your customers who ended up having radical prostatectomies, let's say. And the reason that happened is because those two hospitals have a robot and you don't. And if you would just purchase this robot, you would retain the vast majority of those patients and it would pay for itself. So that's an interesting, different way to look at it. But having that visibility of where a patient's coming and going makes a huge difference in just being more efficient and effective as a health system in making sure you're better at patient care. I mean, we can talk all day about marketing and sales, but I mean, ultimately it comes down to patient care and how do you provide the best technology or the best clinical advantage to the patient. And that, at the end of the day, is what's most important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's interesting when we used Medscout. When we first started using it, one of our first customers that we used it for is a surgeon in Wyoming, and the biggest draw for the Wyoming surgeon was, I want to be able to keep Wyoming patients in Wyoming with a Wyoming surgeon. Right? Because a lot of them will drive 3 hours to the big city of Denver to be able to get better care. Yeah. And it was wild to see where the referrals were coming and where they were going. An ICD-10 code would hit in Wyoming for a workup, and then we would see
referrals in South Denver.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that was where we were like, oh, I think we can really utilize this data to build an actual definitive plan around what we want to go through, and more importantly, a metric of what we can capture, And so we utilized it, and it worked fantastically. Like, we were getting more leads in that guy's, rural community than we would in a lot of big cities. And it was I attribute a lot of it to being able to look up where the referrals were going to begin with. Yeah, I'm really orienting yourself and the other thing is, like, it also gives you a clue of the payers, right? So if you go to a certain market and you're like, I want to go and I want to capture a surgeon in this area. He seems really busy, but you find out that he's doing all of his cases at a facility that either your product's not on contract there, or the pricing's so low it's not worth covering. That's probably not a good fit for you.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to slice and dice it to kind of get you down to, as I mentioned, that ideal customer profile. The interesting thing, I put out a poll on LinkedIn not that long ago, small sample size. I think I only had about 8 people respond to it. And I said, medical device reps out there, do you know what an ideal customer profile is? Has your company provided you with any definition about what is an ideal customer profile? This is a common term in the software world, certainly in the startup investing world. Yeah. One of them said vaguely, and the rest of them said never heard of it. So the fact that medical device companies aren't even relaying to their reps in the field, this is the ideal profile of what our best customer looks like and try to find as many people as close to that as you possibly can, as opposed to you're in Colorado, so let's call on every spine surgeon under the sun until one hits. Let's be much more strategic about how we go about those things. And certainly one of the cool things that we love to really focus on is with, that your example in Wyoming, visualizing those things, like where those referrals are. So we've got a really robust map functionality. So you can go in with that provider in Wyoming and say, what is the geography that you'd like to, what's the catchment area that you'd like to get your referrals from? And you can basically create that catchment area for them and then really understand, who those referrers are and where they're located within that vicinity. So we've had one of my favorite stories. We had a customer of ours was using it in that fashion and was getting some business from a doc because of it. And then the doctor decided he was leaving his practice and going out on his own. First call he made was to that rep and said, hey, I know you've got all this data. Can we sit down and you help me figure out where I should put my practice? And then based on that, what the referral network looks like around that.
And was it a spine?
It was actually, yeah. But being able to understand, having top of mind, you're just building trust and becoming a partner to your customers in a different way than we've ever been able to in the past. I mean, I certainly in my time here in Colorado, if I'd have had this at my fingertips, I might still be selling in spine and orthopedics. I don't know.
Were you a distributor or were you, I don't know, what was your
background? My background. So I started out briefly in urology right out of college, had the good fortune of getting into med device sales right out of college. And
what were you selling in urology?
So I started out, interestingly, in impotence, selling impotence products, and moved over to Bard, selling we'll come back to it, stents, stone retrievers for kidney stones and things like that with Bard, and then had the opportunity to get on with Stryker in the instruments division in Chicago, and sold all the instruments. We had navigation for a little period of time. And then fortunately, my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, had an opportunity that took us to Colorado, which was working as a very early rep with Intuitive Surgical. In the early days, this was end of 2004.
So she was selling Da Vinci's.
Yep. Nice. So she was on the clinical side, basically there for all the cases after Da Vinci's were sold to make sure cases went well, and loved it. I mean, she had a great career there. So that, unfortunately, Stryker didn't have any opportunities out here, so I came out here, and that's when I got on with NuVasive. Started out, that was early on when they had created this position specifically around neurovision.
Their neuromonitoring device, yeah.
Exactly, and obviously everything related to lateral. And that quickly evolved from just neurovision to working with all the distributors in the mountain states, specifically around lateral access and getting physicians trained and all that. And then they eventually started the area business manager program at NuVasive. Not long after that, and I was one of the first area business managers and was running Colorado and Wyoming for a little while.
Wow.
And then did that. After NuVasive, did two startups, one that failed miserably just because everything was over-engineered and overspending, and one that we succeeded very well at, a biologics company called Apotec. We grew that to $65 million in sales and sold it to Baxter for a nice multiplier. And then I stayed on at Baxter for a couple years, managing that business for the Western U.S. with all the distributors that we had. And that just didn't fit the profile of what I wanted to do, the very large company and the way they went about things, and things just lined up well for me to start my own distributorship. So started that in I think 2012, carrying a number of spine lines and orthopedic lines, and spent time building up a team doing that, and had some good success, and then had some interesting opportunities with doctors trying to get their ideas off napkins and helping them out, working to get them into market. And some of that has to do with how they found investors. So dove into that world a little bit, which is what eventually took me into kind of the software side of things, which is how I've gotten to where I am now. But was an early investor and an integral part of a company called Angel MD, where a software platform where we pulled in all the startups within healthcare. And then the other side of the market was our members, which were primarily physicians, clinical experts, and business experts within the space that could kind of lend their crowd wisdom to figure out which of these innovations actually solve the problem and how to market. And then we do deeper evaluations and figure out which the best were. We'd structure investments for them that our members could then be angel investors in and help out. So did that for 5 years, and then COVID hit and things changed in that regard, and I had to move on. So I've been at Medscout for a little over 2 years now, and it's the favorite thing I've done yet.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty vast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never a straight line, right? What is, out of curiosity, do you think it's easier to sell spine implants now or 2012?
Neither, but probably in 2012. I regularly say I miss being in the OR. I don't miss anything about getting to the OR, knowing what I know now. It is just a slog to work through the process with the hospitals and healthcare systems, and the fact that physicians don't have the political capital that they once did to fight for products or fight for the things that they would like to see. They have to really be judicious about which things they really fight for and use. So that's made it tough for you guys, for sure.
Oh no, absolutely. What do you?
What would you say?
So if you're selling back in 2012, there's less positions to be a rep, but once you become a rep, you're probably going to do really well, right? It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Because there's maybe 4 or 5 companies that really matter in spine. Now we carry over 30 companies ourselves just at our distributorship. So you can imagine there's like 250 companies that make a pedicle screw. And to be fair, most of them are fairly similar.
Yeah. Well, you could say the same thing on the biologic side. When I was doing Apotec, we were positioned against Infuse, saying, do you really need to use Infuse in all these cases? 1, 2 levels, certainly in cervical. But there were only, a handful of competitors other than us in the biologic space. Now it's just like the Wild West when it comes to biologics out there. So certainly it is a different animal than it used to be.
There's legitimately 2 biologics, in my mind anyway, as a distributor, that I think have the clinical or historical background to stand up, which is Infuse and iFactor. Like both are class 3 drugs. They're the highest level of indication of fusion, and then everything else is fighting over everything else. you know.
Well, and it's kind of a shell game with regard to how much clinical data you get. Do you have case studies? But what are they on? And
or they all have white papers.
They all went to Fort Collins to get their sheep studies done, and all that stuff.
We got a sheep study. You're like,
it's a little bit of a shell game.
It's wild out there now. Like it's funny whenever people would call me from different sales organizations or sales training organizations, medical sales college, whatever. I'll always, for the most part, I'll take their calls because someone took my call before, right? Yeah, and I was trying to get into the industry. And so, but it's almost always the same. I want to be a spine rep in Denver. And I'm like, well, do you want to be a spine rep or do you want to be in Denver? Because it's a lot of movement. Just you talking about your career, you moved around everywhere, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a really important part, is the willingness to drop ship and move, to be like, hey, we got to pull up anchor. We're getting out of here.
Well, and I'd love to say I was an amazing rep throughout that entire process. That's not true, but being able to navigate and have those different opportunities, I certainly developed and was able to succeed in different ways based on learning from my mistakes previously. But I feel fortunate I've had the diversity of opportunities that I've had.
Yeah. And the cool thing about your position now, Medscout, is exactly that. The history you have behind you, the failures you have behind you, everything else you have behind you helps you to position Medscout in a way that is applicable to growing sales for a distributor like me or a rep like me, right? Like, we obviously understand it. It's because we have a marketing firm. Right. We own Darkwater Consulting, so it's completely different. We use it obviously in a bigger capacity. But even if I were to look back and be like, man, I'm a new rep starting out wherever, I need that information. Like if I can go and sit down with a doctor and have a conversation about not something that's better, but something that's different.
Totally.
That's what I want to do.
Well, and you think about a new rep coming in, there's a new rep coming in and a rep potentially going out. So one of the issues that takes place with a lot of companies is how long does it take to get a new rep up to speed? And that's expensive, right? Not only just training, but how long until they're self-sufficient, how long until they're growing the business. And we're really shortening that time frame. The other thing is, if you've got a struggling rep, why are they struggling, right? So helping your manager understand if you've got somebody who's just not even close to quota, you can actually use our platform to dive in with them and say, okay, are you creating targeting lists? Are you building pipeline to figure out who you should be going after? Do you understand who you should be going after? So are you putting the right targets in those pipelines? So as you start to triage and understand, like, what is this rep doing or not doing that's either aiding or making it difficult for them to get to quota. So if they're building a pipeline and they're putting the right targets in the pipeline, and are they researching those targets well to understand why they're good targets? Are they actually getting in front of those targets? If they're doing all those things and then you're realizing because they're getting in front of those targets that they're still not growing the business, well, that tells you everything you need to know. But if you can triage at those other earlier points to say, okay, well, you maybe look at putting some different targets in here. These are some other targets you might want to consider. And if you just shift their thinking analytically, not so you can analyze them and micromanage them, but so you can get them to grow and understand how to expand their thinking and build their business, can completely change the trajectory for a rep who's underperforming and just having a better understanding of what they're doing.
The hard part about that, because you're 100% correct, the hard part about that is the fact that most medical sales managers were successful in 1993, not now.
Yeah.
So all their solutions are antiquated, right? It's hey, you know what? Just show up at every revision where they're taking out your hardware.
Just build a relationship.
Yeah, and you look at them and you're like, yeah, in 2024, you're not going to get a second case because you helped someone get a pedicle screw out that someone put in 20 years ago.
Right.
Like with your stuff, like you're not gonna get a case from that. Like there's no kudos to that. You're just gonna get yelled at if the stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which that's again what you were talking about is more a testament to the manager at that point than necessarily the tool. With our reps, we talk about you're gonna be an associate for 1 to 2 years in spine because you're gonna be learning that long. Like, I want you to have no pressure to sell. I want to be able to empower you when you're ready to sell, but I want you to just focus on learning. Just sit down and learn. It's expensive, but in the long run, it pays off dividends for us.
Yeah.
And that's Medscout's a big part of that because that's what we can look at the actual individual targets for and sit down and go with them and say, all right, who do we call on?
Yeah.
Well, do we call on this surgeon? Yeah, they're high volume. But look, they're hospital employed. All of their referrals come from this hospital. We don't need to call on them. We can't offer them anything. But this new surgeon over here that is struggling to get patients, we can help with that.
Yeah.
Like we can look that up and see that. But you don't understand that without a metric.
Yeah, and if you can go, sometimes it's not about the high volume because you can also then look and see, well, he's a high paid consultant for our competitors, right? So not a good use of my time. But maybe it's helpful to go out to slightly outside the metropolitan area and find somebody who's not getting as much love. And there's other things as simple as looking at the open payment data. Who takes lunches? Something as simple as understanding that to know what is my access to potential targets as part of that overall development of determining who the best targets to go after are.
So what's kind of break down what the difference is between Acuity MD and Medscout? Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask that question, but I'm curious. I'm curious myself.
So I'll start by saying I love what Acuity MD has done. They had about a year head start on us in the market. In fact, I just saw this morning they finished their Series B raise. So great success for what they're doing. I applaud them because it fuels us. It means we're probably a far better platform than we otherwise would have been had they not been pushing us. And I have to imagine that we've pushed them as well to be better. So we're just lifting the market overall and changing the market for this data and making it available. I'd say some of the big differences, and granted, I don't have access to Acuity's platform on a regular basis to understand all they're doing, and I certainly don't know their roadmap. I do know that our clients feel our platform is extremely intuitive and easy to use. I can speak to our platform and what we know we do well. You mentioned the referral data. We've leaned in really heavily in understanding those referral markets to really just understand the patient pathways and where things are going. For sales management, for sales ops and marketing, we've really leaned in on territory analytics. How do you build out territories? If we're growing, where do we put the next rep? Let's use data to figure out where that is. And then when we figure out where that rep should be, how do we use the mapping and analytic tools that we have to figure out how are we equitable in adjusting everybody's territory to make sure that everybody is properly taken care of and has great opportunity, right? So those are some of the big areas that we've leaned in on. Certainly just the way we've been able to really dive deeply into reimbursement, payer mix, looking longitudinally across everything a target is doing, not just focused on, hey, this is a particular procedure and the volume and revenue that could potentially come from that, but what else are these providers doing? So I certainly want to focus on what's relevant to my product, but I certainly want to understand the full makeup of a potential client and everything they're doing to really easily understand and have that conversation. We want to make it as seamless and intuitive as possible for somebody before they go into a call to know as much as they need to know in a very short period of time. So, I certainly am not going to sit here and speak disparagingly about Acuity because they're doing great things as well.
You know what really wins Medscout over for me? It's your customer service. Like, it's not a chat bot. I thought it was going to be a chat bot, and I was like, no. I remember one time I had a question. I was frustrated about something, and I'm like, oh, man, I get a chat bot. So I start going, and there was like a, hey, how are you doing, Chandler? And I'm like, all right, this chat, you guys stepped up your chatbot game. All right.
No,
and then there was
no
like
AI,
there was a misspelling, bots. And I'm like, this is a real person. This is a real person.
I say regularly, we think we have an amazing platform and we have great data. Our customer success team is the best thing about Medscout, hands down. They are just exceptional. That chat feature we have in platform, you click on that and it usually and very rarely is over a 3-minute response time. I mean, It
was 9:00 at night when I did it the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is wild.
Yeah, they're not going to get back to you in the middle of the night
fair.
Per se. But
that time I did.
Yeah.
And the cool thing was then it was like a follow-up. Let's hop on a call and go through this. And like, it was super intuitive.
Yeah.
But like, I'll say this all the time. You'll win me and keep me as a customer through your customer service. Like your product, yeah, sure, it's interesting. Like if someone has a product that's interesting, great. But I'll take a product that I maybe don't like as much if the customer service is superior to the best product. And I'm not saying that Medscout's inferior in any way, because
not at all.
I think it's great, but you have the most personalized customer service. They made me a video based on Back and Brew about it was like data and drinks or something like that.
Ah, nice.
And explaining like some of the new features, but they made the video and sent it to me. And
Lovely.
I'm like, they're epic. That is awesome.
Without a doubt. I will say one other place we've really leaned in, this applies less to what you do and most of spine and orthopedics, because of spine and orthopedic companies mostly working with distributors, fewer of them work with CRMs like a Salesforce or HubSpot or a Dynamics. But we work in all specialties, right? So the vast majority of companies out there do have a CRM or have invested in a CRM. And the issue, and I think I mentioned it before, they call it Salesforce because sales reps are forced to use it. They don't like spending time in the CRM. So part of our approach and focus has been, how do we make it a lighter lift for the reps in the field who have a CRM? And as far as providing good information, but making sure that the corporate folks who need to use that CRM are getting a full value out of that by seamlessly pushing the right data over into that platform. So that's been a big focus of ours. I guess that's another difference with Acuity. I know for a long time, their CEO and founder kind of poo-pooed CRMs, mainly because they are going down the road of wanting to be a CRM themselves. And we instead decided that we're going to make it the easiest, most seamless process to make it a nice pairing between what Medscout does and the CRM they've invested in.
Yeah, and, which is great because we had to use, what did I have to use? One time I had to use a Sales Logics was another one. Kind of like a Salesforce.
There's a number of them.
There's a bunch. As a rep, I hated it. Yeah. I absolutely hated it because it was going to be guaranteed your manager was going to call you. Well, you didn't put your notes in. You're like, I made like 8 sales calls today.
Right.
And okay, I didn't put notes in for 3 of them. You know, that type of thing. But is what another thing that I've really enjoyed about Medscout is the mapping feature itself is super modifiable. Mm-hmm. You can kind of create your own custom geography to where you can cut your own territory up or reps territories up, however you want to see in a specific geography. And it's been really helpful, especially when we go and we look at whenever we have surgeon customers for dark water consulting, we look at, we don't know different areas. I don't know Dallas. I don't know Columbus. I don't know LA.
Yeah.
But you guys do.
Well, and so does the physician. So they know their geography. So as I mentioned, like when you're talking to one of those doctors, what is the area that you want us to focus on? Like what is the outer boundary of your market? And you can build it right there in front of them.
Well, and that's the crazy part is there's times that we'll have them come in and they'll tell us what they think the area is supposed to be. And we'll pull the data in as we're building it. They'll be like, oh, they're actually, the patients aren't coming from here.
Right. Yeah, let's stretch out over here and see what's taking place.
Yeah.
And we've also got this fun feature. Most people have used Zillow, the real estate app when they're looking for homes. And the ability to, once you start searching, to zoom in to a specific area and focus just on that. And it essentially, by using the map to zoom into a particular focused area, it's going to filter out anything not on the map and just show you results within that map. So it allows you to be really pinpoint with regard to how you do your targeting. And, there's a lot of companies we work with that, their geographies per rep are massive. And there's no way if you're living in San Diego that you automatically know everything going on in Sacramento. So the ability to really use this to focus your efforts and be super efficient when you are going up to that part of your territory and spending your time wisely and really being more successful because of it makes a huge difference for not only the individual rep, but certainly the company.
Do you ever have hospitals that use it?
Interesting question. So,
or ASCs or any facility?
Yeah. So through our existing customers, we do. Excuse me. We've really turned over the reins to our customers to allow them to use it with the hospitals, with the ASCs, with the physician practices. I think down the road we see probably some product feature function where we could go into those markets, but we've been hyper-focused on helping the med device and diagnostic space.
As you should. There's a lot more red tape in the hospitals too to get any of this stuff done.
Sure, but that referral data and that leakage data that I talked about earlier, hugely important to those hospitals, even those physician practice, to understand where their patients are going instead of staying with them, where are they getting second opinions, things like that, can be very valuable. So I see opportunities there, but right now we're letting our clients run with those opportunities.
That's long-term thinking there. That's a very wide perspective. It's funny too because like anecdotally, the hospitals, the spine coordinators at hospitals will always ask me where a surgeon's going. Where else are they going? Where else are they going? And it's always that same data that I would find it useful.
I'm actually surprised that they don't have more of this data at the hospital level or the health system level. It's surprising to me when you go in and they're just not. They're excited to see this data because it just hasn't been available to them.
There's a lot of things that surprise me at the hospital.
Exactly. Yeah, fair point.
Something else I want to talk about too is I remember at NuVasive when I asked how much definitive healthcare was there, I was like, I'll never be able to afford to use something like this outside of NuVasive.
Yeah.
And that was what was really cool about Medscout is you guys actually worked with me on it. Like it wasn't, we're a mid-sized distributor and you worked with us to make it like work for us. And I really appreciated that. It's something that's like, by my nature as a distributor, we customize surgeries for surgeons per patient. And you guys did the same thing for me, which I'm not like, we're not a big Alliance Medical. It's not a huge distributorship by any stretch of the imagination, but you guys made it work to where we were able to utilize that. And it's been really beneficial.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think I'll tell you a little bit about our origin story. So one of our co-founders' father was in the cardiovascular device space for 35 years or so. Had worked for some large companies and was going out to help build a startup and went to Definitive for data. And they came back with a very substantial price tag that was just out of range for a small company like this. His son, Casey, was in the military, had a cybersecurity and software background, and his dad asked him if he'd take some Medicare data and see what he could do with it to make it just more useful for them as a company. So that's nights and weekends. That's how it started. He was working for a large company, AT&T at the time, in cybersecurity, and our co-founder Skylar and he worked together. And Casey saw the opportunity to bring Skylar in as a co-founder and start the business there, and really start dealing with some companies that Casey's father knew to get kind of that MVP, minimal viable product, figure out what is going to work and how it should work well. Off the ground. I came in about a year later to really drive commercialization. And our focus, you can go all over the place. I could have started going after the NuVasives and the Strykers and stuff. And, time will tell whether I should have. But our focus was much more on the small to mid-size companies, the growth companies, and that needed quality data to compete with the big boys. And it allowed us to really build a really strong customer base of those loyal customers who have really been able to grow and develop because of it. So we're certainly moving upstream into larger companies. That's Acuity having a year head start on us is working with some of those larger companies that we're starting to compete in those enterprise areas. But we've built a really strong foundation with those small growing companies that are out there. And they've been a huge focus for us and helpful in helping us develop what the product looks like and how it works.
No, I appreciate it. Man, it's a small company that brought you guys to me, know? So I'm thankful for that. What are you excited about for Medscout in the upcoming years?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, we're just, every month we just completely expand on what we're able to do with the data. I mean, it's really at this point in time based on a really great data partner and some really strong progress we've made on a number of other fronts. It's really a software development speed thing at this point in time. So, and then the other thing is we're really now at a point where we're starting to be more of a known entity in the market. I think that was the biggest thing I would fight against is just, you go to a conference and start conversations with people and they're like, I wish I'd have known about you 3 months ago when we signed with Definitive or Acuity or whatever. And now we're more in the mix of when somebody's looking at data providers, we're one of those that's a consideration because we're becoming much more of a known entity. And that was a lot of grind, if you will. I've spent a lot of time at conferences. So up until the end of last year, it was just me going out and selling Medscout. I've been able to start bringing some great reps on, but it's going to every major specialty conference, and all our potential customers are all in the same hall on the exhibit floor at their booths, waiting for their customers to come to them. So it was just a great opportunity to go have conversations with the right people and start getting them to understand what we're doing.
Are you going to the major society meetings coming up, or?
Yeah, we go to as many of the major society meetings as we possibly can, and that's across all specialties. So, and obviously conference seasons, as we call them, are fall and spring. So Recently I hit a wound care conference, the Digestive Disease Week conference, and Heart Rhythm conference all in a matter of 5 days. So that is a regular occurrence for us. I mean, FaceTime is important. You got to get in front of the people that make these decisions and need this. Trying to catch them on social media or email or phone is a challenging exercise, especially post-COVID, where a lot of the decision makers aren't necessarily located at the home office of the corporation anymore, right? Everybody's been able to kind of move out remotely. So it's not like I can just go to the company front door and knock on the door and say, hey, is so-and-so here? Let's have a conversation. So,
no, absolutely. Well, Mark, thanks for coming on, man. I absolutely love what Medscout's doing, what it enables our reps to do, honestly. The ability as a distributor to be able to go sit down and have a conversation with a doctor, not about a product first, not about a procedure first, but about their business, about their market, and to be able to give them some insight into where referrals are going and where they're coming from is so much more valuable and so much more of an interesting conversation to them than here's an ACDF cage, here's a standalone ACDF cage, 3D printed titanium, PEEK, HA infused PEEK, doesn't matter. Like
different pitch on this pedicle screw, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Is this pedicle screw, is this cortical pitched pedicle screw going to bring in one more patient than this other one?
Well, and no. I mean, I'll finish with this. Our focus is really on how do we help professionalize the medical sales rep. There are a lot of medical sales reps out there now because there's a lot of companies out there, and there are varying levels of professionalism, I guess, if you will. So we've built this maturity model on how do you, at level one, build better pipelines and find the right targets, but then how do you then take the insights we have in the platform to have those conversations at a deeper level as a sales consultant, as opposed to somebody just coming in to ask a bunch of discovery questions, right? And then the way you are, how are we using that referral data to build that relationship and help get more of the right patients coming through their door? Subsequently that helps your business as well. But all those levels really build to how do you become that trusted partner to your customers, to where if they go out into private practice, you're their first call when it comes to those things. So that's really our focus. Beyond just selling you a piece of software and data, it's how do we help really grow your company. And a lot of that comes down to how do you retain your people. I mean, I always say it for a lot of years at NAS, every other year, everybody should just move 2 booths to the left and start working for that company, because that's kind of how it was. Everybody just kind of rotates through, and there's something to be said for retaining talent and developing talent. And this is a really helpful tool to do that.
Absolutely. What's your guys' website?
It is www.medscout.io, not .com, but .io. So you can get a ton of great information there. Mark@medscout.io is my email if anybody wants to reach out and learn more about what we're doing. I'd love to show you the platform and take you through specifically your use case as it relates to your procedures, the diagnosis that are important to you, and how you like to use data to really drive growth.
Someone else already have medscout.com?
I think there's like a recruiting firm out of England or something like that. I'm not sure. So yeah, don't hear much about them though.
Well, that's awesome. And again, man, I wouldn't have someone on here especially with a product that I didn't find valuable. And Medscout is, I think, the most effective weapon that you can put into a sales rep's bag if they're trained to use it.
Right.
And that's what's cool about Medscout is you guys actually have that input because you have that perspective that it is a weapon. And I absolutely love that about you guys. Your customer service still is
they're awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, man, thanks for coming in. Thanks for bringing in bourbon.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for bringing in bourbon. Yeah, and I look forward to being able to do more with Medscout.
For sure. Appreciate the partnership, Trey.
Thank you.